Hey kids, this is Mrs. Sweeney, and this video is about slaking clay, which means basically recycling clay that's been used before yet not fired, still, raw clay. The best way to slake clay and recycle down is to have your clay actually let the scraps do this, just completely dry out, bone dry, because that way it's shrunk, it's got rid of as much of the excess water that it possibly can, so that when you put it down into water like this red clay bin, you'll notice there's like a puddle of water right here. That's because the other night, purposely, I moved some of the clay out of the way to make like a deep pit where the water would drain down, so you can kind of see like how I recycle old clay. So old clay is like the best clay. It's very flexible and plastic when you work with it. But if I take this dry clay and I put it down into the water, it doesn't matter if it's really cold or hot water or anything like that, that clay, you probably can't see it right now, but it's like actually starting to bubble, and it's absorbing water really super quick, so it's going to actually break apart that dry clay and just kind of bust it out all by itself. So come back tomorrow, that clay would be totally disintegrated, broken up, and pretty much pulverized without any extra work from me. So I left the pools of water there to show you what I would do to actually recycle. Like yesterday, out of the white bin, or maybe the other day, I took out 2 whole buckets of this size buckets out and dumped it outside. It looked a lot like this. And then I took it was really super soft clay, and then I took a little old frosting bin or this scoop, and I put just powdered clay. Tried to keep the dust down, but just loaded it up with some powdered clay on top of the really super soft clay to give it a chance to absorb, so that we wouldn't be working in mush, because no use getting all, that's a waste of time. So that way it would have a chance to get a little bit stiffer on its own. I've been airing it out for a couple of days. That'll help get it a little further along before we come back and start recycling and wedging. That's what they really call it. It's wedging and conditioning our clay. You can see the bubbles maybe on the top surface there. It's slaking down naturally. Now, in the stage where you see all these, little puddles, I tried to make it deep so that I could take out the extra water. Now I won't do this whole thing while we're here. I'm just showing you this is what I do to do it. Get the extra water out, because that would take a million years to naturally go away. And I'll even make a little, I'll do the rest later. I'll even make a little river right here. What would you call this? Like the Panama Canal. And let that water drain lower into this, and then I'll get more water out. Then I'll add that powder clay in there as much as I could. See, this is already stiffened a lot more than what it was. I put big mountains of it so that it could dry out. And let's see. So you don't throw away old clay that's never been fired. Now, there's a piece in here I saved to show you. This piece, if you listen, hard as a rock, because it's been fired. It's a scrap, but it had been fired in the kiln, so it has all the extra water, not only regular water, but the chemically bound water has been forced out in a firing process. I mean, it gets up to like 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's transformed back into the early rock state. You cannot put it down here and expect it to recycle. It's not going to happen. Okay, it doesn't affect it whatsoever. That's why old pottery shards, like broken historical potteries from archaeological digs, are such great like artifacts for them to find out what a culture was like. They can like do the carbon aging to it and figure out information from other cultures, because pottery, even if it can be broken from many years ago, can still be puzzled back together. I just dropped a few little shards. I gotta get those out, because those would be like really, those would hurt. Okay, let me get that piece away from our good clay. But it's a good way to study past history. And here's what we did before we left. We have our 2 bags labeled. One for storing our clay once we wedge it up, which I won't show that today, but we'll use the paddles. We'll get the stiffest part that we can and get it up to our wedging table that's very absorbent, and actually work it as if we're kneading bread, like how you use flour to knead bread. We'll use the powdered clay to kind of knead or wedge our clay that's a bit soft and get it into a workable state where it's not super sticky. Then we'll kind of ball it up, put it onto our base. These are nice, these plastic bats. They keep the moisture better and don't warp. And then a little cloth to go on top, because that clay, even if you wedge it and everything, will stick to this plastic, so you don't want that. So we have a little protective sleeve of cloth, old recycled cloth there. And then an extra bag that's labeled to store our sculpture in to keep the moisture in. So basically that's our, and of course labeled, that's our setup, and this is for recycling clay. And I'll see you back at school.